At the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in northeastern Berlin, Michael Friedrichs Friedlander quickly ushers a reporter into his garage. He casts a watchful glance down the street to make sure that the reporter has come alone. Inside, there's a large-scale map of Germany pinned on the far wall. And in the corner, there's a simple workbench where Friedrichs Friedlander has left a hammer, a set of metal stamps, a sheet of paper bearing a series of names and dates, and one word: Auschwitz. Friedrichs Friedlander is the artistic partner of Gunter Demning, who in 1992 created those brass plates found on cobblestone streets throughout Europe. You might have seen them or stumbled upon them. 4-by-4-inch hand-inscribed plates that bear the name and the life dates of victims of the Holocaust, of the Shoah. Placed, as they are, at the last known residence of the murdered. In German, the plates are called stolperstein. Literally, it means a stumbling stone. And they are intended to stop you in your tracks and to make you think of the person whose life was violently ended by the Nazis and no longer lives there, no longer lives at all. I have been thinking a lot about Demning and Friedrichs Friedlander since October 7, because I too have been engraving, one by one, the names of Jewish victims of the greatest mass murder of Jews since the Shoah, since the Holocaust, and the largest in the history of the State of Israel. For me, this holy and heartbreaking task began with a childhood memory. When I was a teen in the 1980s, I remember wearing a metal bracelet with the name of a Soviet refusenik on it, a Jew who was denied permission to emigrate to Israel. As we began to learn the names of the 240 hostages taken by Hamas during their horrific and barbarous attack on the residents of southern Israel on October 7th, just a year ago, I recalled that silver bracelet that I used to wear. And the idea struck me that we must hold on to the names of the hostages as well, and share them, and never let the world forget their torment and their danger. The imperative to remember Yizkor or Zachor is central to Judaism, and it is central to this, the holiest of our holy days, Yom Kippur. The Talmud observes, a person is only forgotten when their name is forgotten. This verse served as the motivation for Demning and Friedrichs Friedlander's Stolperstein project. And it inspired me to create 10,000 stainless steel bracelets, each inscribed with the name of one of the hostages held in Gaza. A stolperstein for your wrist. The bracelets have been distributed all around the world. Some of you are wearing them here this evening. And then a few months ago, as the anniversary of October 7th hung over me and it hung over the world like a heavy black cloud, I thought again about that teaching from the Talmud. A person is only forgotten when their name is forgotten. And how challenging it is not to reduce mass casualty events, be they wars or terror attacks, shootings or natural disasters like we just saw in Florida and the southern part of the United States, to impersonal large numbers that are so big we've become numb to them. How can we conceive of 6 million, or of 1,200, or of 250? How can we conceive and hold space in our hearts for the thousands of innocent civilians in Gaza and the wider region that have been killed in this war? The Talmud teaches that to take one life is to destroy the entire world. We know that teaching. Jews and non-Jews, Israelis and Palestinians, thousands of worlds. A shattering of hopes and dreams. Couples that will never marry, never have children. Stories that will never be written and never told. We must think of people not as numbers, but as names. Names and souls, the souls that are attached to those names. Because none of us here remember our loved ones as our second or fourth grandparent, our third sibling, our first child. We remember them by name, by the way that they embodied the world with their spirit. Maybe some still do. Their humor, their love, their passions, their peculiarities. We remember their soul, their ner neshama, the light of their being, their essence. It's personal to us because they are personal. Like a thumbprint, they are unique, and that's what we remember. And we know them. And we want the world to know them as we know them and remember them as we remember them, never as a number, one among many, but as unique human beings, valued for the individual light, that ner neshama, that light of their soul that they brought into the world and that still reflects through us. That light that is distinct in their experiences and their thoughts because of their contributions. A light that cannot be extinguished as long as we don't forget. If you visit a Jewish cemetery and you look closely at the gravestones, you'll notice that while every name and date on the stone is unique to the individual buried there, one inscription on the headstone is the same for every Jew. The Hebrew abbreviation Taf Nun Tzadi Bet He. It stands for Tehei Nishmato Tarur Bitzur HaChayim. A phrase that we usually translate as, may their soul be bound up in the bonds of eternal life. Yet in Hebrew, Tsarur not only means bond, but it can also mean pebble or small stone. And this is in part the origin of why we place a small stone or a pebble on a grave, on the marker, when we visit a Jewish grave, and not flowers, as is customary in other faith traditions. Because while flowers are a good metaphor for the brevity of life, stones are better suited to the permanence of memory. Stones, like memories, they are held tightly and they are passed down from generation to generation. And when they are passed down ledor vador, when you hold that memory generation to generation, it doesn't die. In fact, stones can grow new life, hosting moss or lichen on their surface and bearing witness to the passage of time. They remain weathered but steadfast as silent guardians of history, embodying resilience and continuity. And just as our memories and stories of loved ones live on in us, stones connect us to those who came before. They ground us in the past while allowing us to dream and shape the future. The small stone is a sign that the person is not forgotten. Visit a cemetery. Visit a cemetery, look around, and you will see. Look at the headstones. Notice the ones without pebbles on them, and those that have built up great mounds of memory. And look closer still, and you will be in awe, as I am so often, to find headstones from the turn of the 20th century that have newly placed pebbles atop them. What a mitzvah. What a legacy to be remembered for blessing 100 years later by generations of your family that you could have only imagined in your wildest dreams, if you imagined them at all. That pebble is not something small. It is a massive monument to memory. It is a massive monument to the memory of the deceased, and it is a custom so rich with meaning. connected to the prayer that our cantor just so beautifully chanted just a moment ago. Ki anu amecha, we are your people. Anu sonecha v'ata ro'enu, we are your flock, and you, our shepherd. In ancient times, a story Rabbi Bregman has told many times. Shepherds needed a system to keep track of their flocks. On some days, they would go out to the pasture with 30 sheep, on another with 10. And memory was unreliable. It was an unreliable way of keeping tabs on the numbers of the flock. So as a result, the shepherd would carry a pouch over his shoulder, and in it he would keep the number of pebbles for each of the sheep that were in his care and charge. That way he could at all times have an accurate daily count. When we place pebbles on the grave, inscribed with the motto that I mentioned on the stone above, we are asking God to keep the departed soul in God's pouch, in God's pocket. Among all the souls whom God has to watch over, we wish to add the name, the pebble, of the soul of our departed. Stones have a special character in Judaism. In the Bible, an altar is no more than a pile of stones, but it's on an altar that we make an offering to God. The stone upon which Abraham takes his son to sacrifice that we read about on Rosh Hashanah, it's called Even Hashtiyah, the foundation stone of the world. And the most sacred shrine in Judaism, the ancient temple, it's a pile of stones. The Western Wall, a pile of stones. In moments when we are faced with the fragility of life, Judaism reminds us that there is permanence amidst the pain. While other things fade, stones and souls endure. Listen to this. When Jacob and his father-in-law Laban reconciled after that whole thing with the marriage and the working in the 7 years, they make a covenant. And make a covenant as an eternal witness to their pact of peace and reconciliation. And listen to what they do. Together they erect a stone pillar and gather a heap of stones, a cairn. And this pile of stones acts as a witness to the agreement between them. And they named that heap Galid in Hebrew, meaning a heap of witness, a mound of witness or witnesses. The pile of stones that we see on graves represent the unspoken yet profound covenant that we have with the dead. They are a silent but lasting witness to the promise that we make to hold on to the memory of the deceased and to never forget the lessons of their life, the uniqueness of their ner neshama, the light of their soul. When a person dies, it's only the body that returns to the earth. The soul is everlasting. However, the soul cannot make a difference in this world anymore. That obligation, it falls on us, the keepers of the memory, the ones who hold the promise to ensure that the person will continue to influence the world through us. And we place the stone as a promise and as a witness to that they will influence the world through us. And so as this horrible anniversary loomed, and I considered that we would all be here, gathered as a community of sorrow, of reflection and memory, I wanted to do two things. First, to acknowledge with intention and a mournful and broken heart the loss of innocent lives throughout this conflict. The death of innocents in Gaza, in Lebanon, in refugee camps, who are caught between terrorist extremists and a nation trying to defend itself. Both Judaism and Islam hold the same teaching I mentioned before, that to take one innocent life is to destroy the entire world. And worlds and worlds and worlds have been shattered and decimated this past year. For both Jews and Muslims, Israelis and Palestinians, we cannot deny that or overlook that. And secondly, I wanted to create a way for us as a congregation to truly hold sacred the memory of each of those 1,200 plus Israeli victims that were murdered on October 7th, and the hundreds of Israeli soldiers and first responders and civilians that have been killed since that horrible date a year ago. But not only hold the memory, but also accept the mitzvah, the promise and the obligation to be the conduit, the channel through which the souls of those murdered on 10/7 would be kept alive in this world through our actions on their behalf. And so tonight, as you leave our services, you're going to be given a small black stone. Each is inscribed with the name and the age of one of the victims of the Hamas attacks of October 7 and the Israelis killed in the war since. 1,658 stones, representing 1,658 memories and souls and lives cut short. And just for context, there are about 880 people in this room. Look around. Double that number. Double that number. I'm asking each of us to take 1 or 2 stones home. It's going to take more than 1 per person to hold these sacred. And to study the name engraved on it. Consider their age, their gender, how much life they had ahead of them or behind them, the chapters of their story that they will never write or finish. The entire worlds that have been destroyed by their murder. And as you hold the stone, I invite you to also think about your own life, as we are commanded to do on this, the holiest of days. If the memory of the departed is to teach us anything in their death, then the greatest lesson that we might learn is it teaches us how to live. A tragedy among the many tragedies of October 7 is that the vast majority of the victims were so young and at the very beginning of the fullness of their lives. As my family and I inscribed every single name, so many were in their 20s from the music festival, soldiers in the IDF. They never for a moment on that Shabbos morning thought that they would not have tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. There are lessons in death, painful though they may be, and one of them is that life is finite, and maybe that is the most important lesson any of us could ever learn. The most important lesson that this Yom Kippur and Judaism has to teach us in general. Because it comes to teach us again and again through our rituals around death that life is finite. No one is guaranteed tomorrow. Judaism teaches, live each day like it is your last because you don't know. It very well may be. The psalmist declares the span of a person's life is 70 or 80 years. And they pass by speedily, and we are unaware. And so teach us, therefore, O God, to number our days, that we might attain a heart of wisdom. Teach us not to waste time. The German existentialist Martin Heidegger, in his masterwork, Being in Time, taught that in order to truly live authentically, we have to confront death head on. Knowing that I am going to die is what allows me to truly live. You don't think like that if you're a 20-year-old dancing at a music festival in the desert, or even a soldier looking at a video surveillance monitor in a quiet, dusty military base. And now a whole generation of Jews, a whole country of Israelis, and a whole region of innocent civilians consider that possibility of death every single moment. And it changes you. After the holiday, because you shouldn't use the internet on Shabbat, Google the name. Google the name of the person or the people, the stones that you take responsibility for when you leave here this evening. Most of those have loving tributes posted about them by their friends and their family online. Learn about their life. As a person, not as a number, one among hundreds. Remember them for how they lived, not how they died. Hold their memory as a sacred obligation, because we are the conduit now. For those stones you hold, you are the conduit. You hold the lessons of their life and trust with you. Incorporate those lessons into your own life and make a commitment. Make a promise here on Yom Kippur to share them with the world. You will share them. Don't let their name, their neshama, become a number. Our people have been numbered too many times, in too many horrific ways to count, to let those 1,658 souls just be that, a number. I will share with you that as my family and I inscribed each of these stones one by one over the past month, we were often brought to tears at the unfathomable loss our people and the world experienced on October 7th. The blessing of their memory is that it has made me appreciate life, my Judaism, and Israel, and the lessons of our people's traumatic and yet resilient history more than I ever have in my entire life. Tomorrow or next week, sometime before Simchat Torah, bring your stone back here to the synagogue. And if you like, we will have silver Sharpies that you can use to write an indelible message on the back of your stone as a further tribute to the person and a pledge to carry forward their soul's purpose in your own life. And then I ask you to place the stone at the base of a special monument that is being erected in our Shalom garden right next to our Holocaust memorial. You'll see a temporary spot that's there now. We've commissioned that, and it would not have been possible without our incredible sisterhood who contributed the funds to make it possible. A permanent memorial to the victims. The monument, a granite monolith in the shape of Israel, will be installed in the coming days in our Shalom garden. It's not there yet. And will be dedicated in a ceremony on Thursday morning, October 24th, Simchat Torah, the Hebrew anniversary of the attacks of October 7. Bring your stones, the souls that you are holding and taking responsibility for, back by Simchat Torah. Come dance with the Torah and cry with our community as we remember every name and every soul destroyed and now entrusted into our hands to carry them forward Lador Vador for generations to come. And as we meditate and celebrate in our outdoor space in the coming months and years and generations, as weddings and simchas and B'nai Mitzvah parties are held out there, and religious school gatherings and picnic lunches for our seniors, I pray that the memorial in our Shalom garden will serve as a stumbling stone for us, a stolperstein for us, as a reminder of lives taken and our commitment to make their memories a blessing of this congregation's commitment to choose life, to never forget, and to never stop working for peace so that no more monuments to victims of terror will ever need to be built anywhere. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will and our eternal prayer. Amen.